The wind scraped along the porch boards like a dull knife, carrying with it a skin of dust that clung to everything it touched. Jed Cole's fingers tightened around the handle of the bucket he'd just hauled from the well. His breath was short, the pain in his left side stabbing sharp with every movement, but he didn't stop. Out here, we didn't stop for pain. A calf bawled from the corral. "Hi," panicked. Jed set the bucket down, straightened, and crossed the yard in long, deliberate strides. The boards of the fence groaned under his grip as he leaned in. The little heifer was caught in a tangle of wire, sides heaving, eyes rolling white. "Easy now," he muttered, voice like gravel under a boot. His breath hung faint in the cool of early morning, though the sun was already burning gold along the rim of the distant mesa. He pulled the wire loose, hands steady despite the fire that burned under his ribs. The calf stumbled free and loped to the far end of the pen. Jed stayed there a moment, one hand braced against the post, the other pressed to the swelling under his shirt. Something shifted inside him when he touched it. Not just pain, a solid, unyielding thing, hot as a stove plate. His teeth clenched. He straightened slowly, eyes narrowing on the desert stretching out in every direction, as though the land itself was watching. From the far ridge, a hawk wheeled, its shadow slicing over the dry earth. Somewhere beyond that ridge lay Lone Mesa, too far to see, but close enough for the memory of its creaking saloon doors and dust-choked main street to stir behind Jed's eyes. He hadn't set foot there in months. Couldn't stand the stairs. Couldn't stand the questions. He crossed back to the porch, boots crunching on grit. The bucket sat where he'd left it, the water inside already rippling with the restless wind. He carried it into the house, set it down beside the basin. The floorboards beneath him shifted and popped, wood swollen from years of heat and cold. In the corner, on a nail hammered deep into the wall, hung a cracked leather gunbelt. Dust had gathered along the holster like fine snow. Beside it, nailed crookedly, was a photograph, a woman with dark eyes, a boy on her lap. Jed's gaze caught there for a moment longer than he meant it to. Then he turned away. The pain came again, sudden and sharp, buckling his knees. He gripped the edge of the table until it passed, the wood biting into his palms. A thin sheen of sweat broke across his brow. He lifted his shirt. The swelling was worse than yesterday. The skin stretched tight, veins dark and angry. Outside, a low rumble rolled over the land. He moved to the doorway, scanning the horizon. No storm clouds yet, but the wind had shifted, carrying the dry metallic taste that always came before lightning. Down by the far fence, something flickered, movement where there shouldn't be any. Jed's eyes narrowed. A rider, half hidden by heat shimmer, lingered on the edge of the property, just sitting there, watching. The wind tugged at Jed's shirt, whipping dust around his boots. His hand rose unconsciously toward the empty place at his hip before he stopped himself. He stood there until the rider turned, a dark silhouette against the glare, and disappeared into the rolling heat. Jed stayed in the doorway, the ache under his ribs pulsing in time with his heartbeat. Somewhere far off, a lone coyote called, its cry thin and lonesome across the empty miles. The wind carried the smell of mesquite and something else, faint, but sharp enough to set his teeth on edge. Smoke. The wind had turned mean by nightfall, rattling the shutters like bones in a tin can. Jed lay on his cot, one arm pressed against his side, breathing through clenched teeth. Every breath felt like a hot knife working its way deeper. A loose board thumped against the wall in the barn. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, boots meeting the floor with a hollow thud. The lantern on the table sputtered when he lit it, throwing light that barely held back the dark. Outside, the cold bit hard for spring. The yard stretched out pale under a sharp-edged moon, every post and trough casting long, black shadows. His breath steamed as he crossed to the barn, the light from his lantern swaying over the ground. The horses shifted uneasily in their stalls. He could hear their soft snorts, the shuffle of hooves against dry hay. The smell of them was warm and real, but underneath it clung that faint tang of smoke from earlier, now stronger. He paused, listening. Hoofbeats, distant, slow, then gone. The ache under his ribs pulsed like it wanted out. He set the lantern on a barrel, bracing himself against the stall door. His knees buckled and he went down hard, his shoulder hitting the packed dirt. The horses shied, stamping and tossing their heads. He couldn't pull in a full breath. His hand pressed into the swelling, the skin there hot, stretched thin. He could feel something, not soft like flesh, but solid round. It shifted when he moved. His head swam. Lightning flashed beyond the open barn door, throwing his shadow against the far wall. The crack of thunder followed close, shaking the boards. Wind roared through the gaps, and the lantern's flame bent low. The pain spiked, white and blinding. Jed curled over, teeth bared in a soundless snarl. His vision blurred. Then, with a tearing heat that made him grunt like he'd been gut-punched, the swelling split. A metallic clink hit the dirt. For a moment, he just lay there, breathing in short bursts. Then he pushed himself onto an elbow and looked. There, in the lamplight, half sunk in the dust, lay a small, tarnished bullet. Its lead was dulled, edges pitted from time. Blackened residue clung to it. Not fresh metal old, decades old. His fingers closed around it. The weight was nothing, but in his palm it felt heavier than iron. He knew it the way a man knows his own heartbeat. He'd felt it once before, the day it had torn through his flesh and lodged deep inside. A memory struck hard and fast. The heat of noon, the dry crack of a revolver, the smell of cordite. A face across the street, pale eyes over the barrel of a Colt. The jolt when the bullet hit. The slow collapse into dust. The world tilting away. A gust of wind shoved at the barn doors. They banged wide, lightning burning the sky white. In that instant, he thought he saw movement on the ridge, a figure against the light, still as stone. Then darkness swallowed it again. He closed his fist around the bullet. His breath steadied, but not from relief. The ache was gone, replaced by something colder. The storm rolled closer, thunder drumming the ground. Somewhere out there, the black vultures were riding, and now they'd find him ready. Rain hit the tin roof in hard, uneven bursts, each drop ringing sharp in the stillness of the barn. Jed sat at the workbench, the tarnished bullet resting in his palm, the lamplight glinting off its scarred surface. His fingers closed over it, slow and deliberate, as if sealing a pact. The gunbelt lay in front of him, the leather cracked and darkened with age. He slid it closer. The revolver came free from its holster with a whisper, the blued steel still clean, still oiled. He spun the cylinder, smooth, flawless. Outside, a horse snorted, hooves shifting in the mud. He froze, listening. The storm muffled the sound, but there, under the wind's howl, came the faint, heavy rhythm of more hooves. Not close, not yet, but coming. He set the bullet down beside the revolver, reached for the cartridges on the shelf. One by one, the chambers filled with brass and lead, each click loud in the quiet. The door swung open on a gust, and Sheriff Briggs stepped inside, water dripping from the brim of his hat. His eyes fell to the gunbelt. "You planning on riding out in this?" the sheriff asked, voice low. Jed buckled the belt, the weight settling against his hip like it had been waiting for years. "They're here for me," he said. Briggs's jaw tightened. "Vulture's been moving through the canyons all week. You think they're—" "I don't think," Jed cut in. "I know." Another rumble of hooves rolled across the land, closer now, mixing with the storm's growl. The sheriff stepped to the doorway, scanning the black horizon. "We could get a posse together." "No time," Jed said, sliding the revolver into its holster. "And no need." Briggs turned back, the lamplight catching the lines around his eyes. "You're one man, Cole." Jed adjusted the belt. "That's all it'll take." The wind shoved at the barn, boards groaning. Jed moved past the sheriff, stepping into the rain. It was cold, cutting through his shirt, but his stride didn't slow. The yard was a churn of mud and shadow, the corral fence a dark line against the silver ground. Lightning flashed, and for an instant the ridge stood out clear, riders on the crest, black shapes against the stormlight. Jed mounted his horse, the leather saddle creaking under his weight. He leaned forward, murmured something low into the animal's ear. The horse shifted, ready. The sheriff's voice carried over the wind. "You ride into town armed like that, folks will remember what you were." Jed looked back once, rain dripping from the brim of his hat, eyes cold under the shadow. Good. Another flash split the sky, and then he was moving, hooves hammering the wet earth, throwing up mud as he cut a straight line toward Lone Mesa. The bullet in his pocket thudded with every stride, each jolt a reminder. Somewhere behind him, thunder swallowed the sound of the sheriff calling his name. Ahead, the lights of town flickered faint in the rain, waiting. Dawn bled pale over Lone Mesa. The rain gone, but the streets still slick with it. Mud sucked at boots and hooves alike. The town lay hushed, windows shuttered, doors barred. Somewhere, a sign swung on rusted chains, creaking with each lazy push of the wind. Jed stood in the center of Main Street, hat brim low, one hand loose by his side, the other resting on the worn grip of his Colt. Steam rose from his horse, tied at the hitching post behind him. From the far end of the street, the black vultures came. 6 riders, dark coats heavy with water, horses snorting in the chill. The leader rode ahead, a broad man with a hawk-nosed face, his eyes pale and unblinking. Boot heels struck wet boards as a few townsfolk eased onto porches, their gazes sharp from the shadows. No one spoke. The only sound was the steady clop of hooves and the slow squeak of saddle leather. The riders fanned out, their mounts shifting, breath steaming in the cool air. The leader reined in, looking Jed over like a man inspecting something he already owned. "Well, I'll be," he said, voice carrying down the empty street. "Cold to cold. Thought you were rotting in the desert by now." Jed said nothing. "You've been hiding a long time," the leader went on. "But I guess every shadow runs out at night." A drop of water slid from Jed's hat brim, fell into the mud. His thumb brushed the hammer of the Colt. The leader's grin was thin, humorless. "Boys!" The first shot cracked the silence. Jed moved before the sound was gone, the Colt clearing leather with a smooth, practiced pull. Thunder in his hand, smoke curling into the morning air. A rider pitched sideways, boots slipping free of the stirrup as he hit the ground. The vultures scattered, hooves churning mud, guns flaring. Bullets spat splinters from the posts near Jed's head, punched holes through the clapboard walls. He stepped sideways, fast but measured, firing once, twice. Each shot a man down. The leader wheeled his horse hard, spurring it into a charge. Jed's eyes never left him. He fired again, the bullet striking clean, the big man jerking back in the saddle before toppling into the street. The storm of noise broke as quick as it began. Steam rose from the horses of the last 2 vultures as they reined up, eyes wide. One dropped his gun, let it sink in the mud. The other turned tail, galloping out toward the open desert. Jed stood still, smoke drifting from the barrel of his Colt, breath even. The street was quiet now, save for the hiss of cooling iron and the distant call of a lone crow. The sheriff appeared at the far end, stepping over a fallen rider. His eyes took in the bodies, then fixed on Jed. Jed slid the Colt back into its holster. His hand brushed the pocket where the tarnished bullet lay. He touched it once, as if to remind himself it was real. Without a word, he crossed to his horse, untied the reins. Boots and stirrups, he swung up into the saddle. The sheriff called after him. "Where you headed?" Jed tipped his hat, eyes on the horizon where the sun was just breaking the edge of the mesa. Someplace quieter. The horse moved off, hooves striking wet earth, carrying him toward the open land. Behind him, the townsfolk whispered, their voices carrying like dry grass in the wind.